Good afternoon. Market moves coming here on the weekend. We're going to dive into float. What does this mean? How does this help you? This is something for investors and traders alike, so stay tuned. So what is float? Why is it important and why should I care? So this is something very vital for traders because float can affect how fast a stock moves, and you want to be trading things with a so-called low float. And I've been avoiding anything that involves this word for a long time, and I finally took the opportunity to study it this weekend and understand what it means, how it can help me. And what I found is really great information, and it's going to be something I use pretty much daily for whatever trade I use and whatever stock I'm looking into. So this is mostly for traders, but if investors want fast price movement over months or maybe a year, float will affect. So I believe this is valuable for anybody that is in the market. But if you haven't, hit that subscribe button because videos like this come out all the time, and this is one that helps out traders and investors, and this is a good learning piece. But most of the time I put out charts and overviews on stocks. I'm just going to get into this now, and yeah, hit that subscribe button. Would greatly appreciate it. And if you are subscribed, I would love if you could share this video. So this is the float calculation. This is how the number is calculated. You can find this on many websites. If you just type in Apple float, or you can type in Tilray float, you can get that number. So outstanding shares of common stock minus the restricted shares equals the float. So this is the amount of shares out there pretty much. Float is related to shares of stock. And this is very important because the lower number of shares, the lower float that is out there, the higher a stock can rise because it only takes a small amount of those shares to be traded for the stock to increase. So here are some straight up examples of the different float numbers for companies out there. So we have Apple with 5 billion shares of float, HMNY with 1.5 billion, and then this company I'm pretty bullish on currently called Fred. Fred has 20 million shares in the float. So that means if Apple has good news on one day, if let's say 10% of the investors trade their shares, the stock can only move a certain amount because it's got 5 billion more shares that need to be traded in order for the price to increase a lot. And if we get down to HMNY, 1.5 billion is still a huge number of shares. And this is related to all those reverse splits and whatnot. And it shows kind of a bearish signal for this stock. So HMNY, 1.5 billion shares of float, that is a huge number for a penny stock. So that is kind of a red flag in my opinion, because if we're looking for this thing to take off to 6 cents or 50 cents, we have to have 1.5 billion investors on deck to sell and then on deck to buy, and then that cycle rinse and repeats for a while. And Fred, the stock that I'm pretty bullish on right now, is at 20 million float. So that means only 20 million people need to trade this stock, or half of that, for the price to increase a significant amount. And the amount of shares that are day traded from this is a good example of how the stock can pop, because, and this is just a quick example. I just made this pie chart and I put some people inside, and this is going to give you an example of how low float can really change stock prices. So right here we have our 3 investors, and they are the founders of the company, and we have some nice little females down here trying to buy some shares. And because some great news came out, these females are ready to buy, and these investors are ready to sell because they got in early. They have a low price for that stock, and once that stock moves maybe a good amount, they're ready to trade it and sell their shares. So there's 3 people in the company, and this is a basic chart that I'm going to show you of this example as well. So those 3 people, maybe they bought down here at the bottom, and once the stock starts to rise around here, they're in the money. They're making money. Life is good. They sold their stocks, and what you get is the females are in, and then we have one guy who didn't sell because maybe he's he's got restrictions, or maybe he's long-term visioned and he wants to hold these forever. So these females just got in, and we'll go back to the chart, and the stock continues to rise because maybe someone else found out the great information about this company, and then they come in. And let's go back to that chart. And now the boys bought back in because they felt bad about selling, and their shares are up again. So that would mean that the price increased. The women sold for a gain. The guys got back in, and because the stock is split in thirds, the stock price can rise quickly because more shares can be traded that are a percentage of the whole shares. So you have what I showed you is 60% of the shares were traded, and these can be traded back and forth. And because it's a large number of the whole number of shares, that can move a stock price a lot, because if people can trade those shares back and forth, you can see a lot of volume, and more volume is good. Now we're going to dive into a chart, and I'm going to show you why this is interesting, because like I said, when there's a low number of stocks out there, a low float as they call it, these shares can be traded aggressively. They can be traded a lot, and you can see the volume show this. So if I go to the volume bars down here, this is going to give an indication of the amount of volume that is traded per day, and this is actually the weekly volume. So if I go to the week, last week, the last current week, 10/18, we see 8 million shares were traded of Fred. And that, like I said, there's about 25 million out there. So that is a large percentage of the shares. So because the stock moved a lot, you can also verify that the float was low and the volume was high. So that's a good indication that this stock is gaining traction, picking up new investors. People are trading the stock a lot, and it's just going to topple on top of each other. So the price is just going to go on top, on top, on top. And that's how it builds. That's how it grows. And this humongous week where it gapped up, there was 47 million shares traded. And that's way more than the shares available. So that means that people were just either day trading this, or big hedge funds were getting in. And other hedge funds that had it before were selling it for a profit. And now these new investors that are just in the stock now want to see a profit. So when they start buying at this price, they want to see it go up. And if it's an institution, they can make that happen because they have a lot of power, a lot of money. They can manipulate these small, low float stocks. And this is just a good way of how you do your research and how you can understand which stocks are going to move based off float and volume. So two key factors today, float and volume. These are going to help you pick the better runners. And just an example again, if I have HMNY, it's got 1.5 billion shares out there. So that's a ton of shares. And if I go to the average volume on the daily, we'll just go to the weekly, like that last chart I showed you. On the weekly, we're getting about 500 million shares last week. And the week before that, we had it's actually saying 1.3 billion. So again, this is a very small stock. We're seeing a lot of volume equal to the float. So that's a good sign if you want to see this price increase. So you want to look to that. You want to look to the float number. The lower number is always better, but you always again want to compare it to that volume traded for the week, for the day, and that'll give you better understanding of where the stock can go. So hopefully this helps you understand float. Hopefully this helps you as a trader and an investor. And hit that like, comment, subscribe button if you did enjoy this. And if you want to hear anything specific, just let me know. I would love to help you out as an investor and as a watcher. So thank you for watching. Market Moves signing off. Peace.